There's something about the game of hide and seek that's always felt wrong when you think about it too long. You're teaching yourself to disappear, to stop making noise, to quiet your breath, to blend into the darkness, and to wait while someone moves through your house or your yard, calling your name. It's supposed to be innocent, a childhood thrill. But every once in a while, you realize how fragile that feeling really is. How easily a game meant to make you laugh can turn into something that makes you freeze. I've heard people say it's just imagination, that fear of being found, that feeling of being watched from the dark. But for the people who lived through what I'm about to tell you, it wasn't imagination. It was something else. Each story you're about to hear started the same way, with a group of kids, a safe place, and a simple game. It's funny how quickly those things can stop feeling safe once the lights go out, or the night air turns colder than it should be. When you're hiding, the silence becomes its own kind of sound. Every floorboard creak, every breath you take, every small shift of air feels louder, heavier, closer. And when you finally realize that you're not the only one playing, that's when the game changes. The first story takes place in a quiet neighborhood where two friends decided to play hide and seek inside one of their houses. The rules were clear: no attic, no crawl space, no going outside, simple, safe, until one of them realized there was someone else hiding with them. The second story happened in the woods, the kind of woods that look endless when the sun goes down. A group of kids used to play there every weekend, laughing, running, vanishing between the trees. But one night, one of them swore he heard footsteps that didn't belong to anyone in their group. Another swore he saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line, waiting. They thought it was part of the game. It wasn't. And the third story, that one's different, because sometimes the thing hiding isn't a ghost or a shadow. Sometimes it's another person, someone who doesn't play by the same rules you do. In this story, a boy meets a stranger during a summer afternoon game. Someone who says he just wants to join in. The stranger smiles, plays along, disappears for a while, and then starts showing up when no one's supposed to be there. 3 games. 3 nights that started out like any other. The laughter, the counting, the sound of bare feet on carpet or dry leaves, and then the stillness, that cold realization that something has gone wrong. These are stories about the moments when hide and seek stopped being a game and became something much, much darker. You've probably played it yourself back when you were a kid, maybe even recently with your own family. You know that feeling when the lights go off and you can hear the seeker moving somewhere close, the tension of waiting to be found. But imagine staying perfectly still, holding your breath, listening, and realizing the footsteps don't match the person who's supposed to be looking for you. That's when the game turns into something else. That's when you understand how dangerous silence can be. These aren't urban legends. They aren't made-up campfire tales. They're real accounts told by the people who lived through them, people who still don't play hide and seek anymore. And after you hear what happens, you might not either. I was 15 when it happened. A Friday night in late September. The air just beginning to turn cold, the kind of night that makes you want to stay inside. My parents were out having dinner with friends, and for once, the house was mine. I invited over my best friend, Chris. He lived across the street. Same age, same kind of boredom that comes when you're old enough to want excitement, but too young to find any real trouble. We hung out in the basement at first, playing video games, eating junk food, the usual. But after a while, the energy died down. That's when Chris, half joking, said we should play hide and seek. At first I laughed. We were 15, not kids anymore. But there was something about the emptiness of the house, the quiet, that made the idea sound different, almost like a dare. We made up simple rules. No attic, no crawl space, no going outside. The rest was fair game: basement, bedrooms, closets, under furniture. We turned off most of the lights to make it creepier, leaving only the one in the kitchen. Shadows filled the corners of the house, stretching long across the walls. Chris wanted to hide first, so I covered my eyes in the living room and counted to 50. I could hear his footsteps at first, quick and light, moving through the house. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, the whole place felt hollow. I started my search in the kitchen. Empty. I checked the bathroom, my parents' room. my own. Each door creaked softly, and every time it did, my heart skipped. Upstairs, the air felt heavier, quieter. I saved the guest room for last, the one at the end of the hallway. The door was cracked open. I pushed it gently, expecting Chris to jump out laughing. But the room was still. The bed neatly made, the curtains barely moving. I knelt down to look under the bed. Nothing. I checked the closet empty. It felt wrong that he wasn't there, like the house itself was hiding him. I went downstairs again, checked behind the laundry machines, under the stairs. Finally, behind a stack of boxes in the basement corner, I found him curled up, grinning. He laughed when I jumped. We joked about how long it took me, and then it was my turn. I ran upstairs and slid under the guest bed, pulling the bed skirt down. It smelled faintly of dust and detergent. I could hear him downstairs counting, his voice echoing faintly through the floor, and the creak of footsteps as he started searching. After a while, I heard him come upstairs. Slow steps. One door opening, then closing. The sound of drawers moving. The footsteps came closer down the hall. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Then I heard him in the guest room. He stopped right near the bed. I held my breath, waiting for the fabric to lift. His shoes shuffled once, then silence. I could almost feel him standing there, listening. After what felt like minutes, he walked out. I waited even longer before crawling out. The hallway was empty. When I called out to him, he didn't answer. Then, from the basement, his voice shouted back that he was still looking for me. I froze. My body went cold. I told him I was upstairs. There was a pause, then his footsteps coming up fast. He looked at me, confused. "How'd you get up here so fast?" he asked. I told him I'd been under the bed the whole time. He frowned, said he'd checked that room and even heard someone breathing under the bed. I swore I hadn't moved or made a sound. We argued for a second before laughing it off, but the air felt heavier now, like the house had started listening. We played another round, trying to shake it off. Every sound, the click of the pipes, the groan of the floorboards, felt like something shifting just out of sight. I remember when I was counting, I thought I heard a dull thud from upstairs. When I checked, nothing was out of place. Later, when we finally sat on the couch, the TV flickering faint light across the room, we heard it again, a loud bump from upstairs. Both of us froze. "Maybe it's your parents," Chris said, but they weren't home. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, faintly, the sound of floorboards creaking, footsteps moving down the hallway above us. Slow, deliberate, we stared at each other, neither breathing. I whispered that maybe we should check. He shook his head, but I couldn't sit still. I grabbed the fireplace poker, my hands trembling. We crept up the stairs, step by step, the wood groaning under our weight. At the top, the guest room door was closed. I knew I hadn't closed it. We stood there, staring. Then, from behind the door came a sound, a dragging noise. Fabric sliding across the carpet. My mouth went dry. Chris whispered, "Let's just go." But something in me needed to see. I raised the poker, pushed the door open. The room looked normal. The closet door was half open. We both stared at it. I yanked it wide. Nothing. Just coats and boxes. We both laughed shakily, pretending it was nerves. That's when we heard it again, this time from downstairs. The front door opening, then closing. We froze. Chris whispered, "Someone's in the house." My chest tightened. We ran to my room and turned off the lights, crouching in the dark. I could hear the blood in my ears, my own breathing ragged. Then, faint footsteps on the first floor. I wanted to call the police, but my phone was still downstairs. We waited. The sound moved to the basement door. Hinges creaked. The steps went down one by one. When they disappeared below, we bolted. We sprinted down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door, and across the street to Chris's house. His parents were still awake. When we told them, they called the police. Officers searched the house top to bottom. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. No one hiding anywhere. They said maybe the house was settling, maybe our minds were running wild. But I know what we heard. The footsteps, the door, that slow dragging sound behind the guest room door. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the walls felt like someone moving just out of sight. I never played hide and seek again. Sometimes, when Chris and I see each other, we don't even talk about it, but we both remember. That night, the game stopped being a game. That night, I learned how terrifying it is to realize you might not be alone in your own house. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood that backed right up against a stretch of forest. Every house on the street had a backyard that ended where the trees began. A thick wall of green that felt endless in the dark. When we were younger, those woods were our playground. Every weekend, a bunch of us kids from the street would meet up to play. In the summer, we stayed out until our parents started yelling for us to come home. One of our favorite games was hide and seek. During the day, it was fun, harmless, a way to burn energy. But at night, the woods changed. They became something else darker, quieter, as if the whole place was holding its breath. The trees all looked the same once the sun went down. And if you weren't careful, you could get lost just a few steps in. That was what made it exciting. And that's what made it terrifying. The last time we ever played there, I was 14. It was a hot, humid August night, the kind that clings to your skin. There were 5 of us. Me, my friend Tyler, his little brother Matt, and 2 kids from down the street, Jason and Eric. We decided to play outside because it was too stuffy inside anyone's house. The rule was simple. You could hide anywhere in the backyards or in the woods, as long as you could still hear the seeker call when the round was over. Jason volunteered to be it. The rest of us ran. Tyler and I went straight into the trees, our sneakers crunching over dry leaves. After a few steps, we split up. I crouched behind a fallen log, my heart beating way too fast for what was supposed to be a game. I could still hear Jason shouting numbers from the yard, his voice echoing through the dark. Then, when he reached 50, everything went quiet. The air was thick, with the smell of damp earth and pine. Crickets droned, and something rustled far off in the leaves. I tried not to move. After a while, I heard footsteps slow, heavy, moving between the trees. I thought it was Jason. I held my breath, waiting for him to pass. But the footsteps stopped just a few feet away. Whoever it was stood there, perfectly still. The sound of breathing drifted through the dark. I waited for Jason to call out or start counting again, but he didn't. The seconds stretched. My muscles ached from staying so still. Finally, the footsteps started again, this time moving deeper into the woods, crunching leaves as they went. I stayed put until I couldn't hear them anymore. When I finally crawled out, I looked toward the yard and saw a faint glow from the porch lights. I headed back, brushing dirt from my arms. Jason was already there with the others. He found Tyler and Eric, but not me or Matt. A moment later, Matt came running out of the trees, laughing, covered in dirt. Jason said that made everyone, and we all regrouped near the fence. I told them I almost got caught when Jason walked right past me in the woods, but he looked confused. I never went that far in, he said. I stayed near the edge. I frowned, told him I heard footsteps right by me, even breathing. Everyone just shrugged. We laughed it off and started another round. This time I was the seeker. I pressed my face to a tree and started counting loud enough for them to hear. When I reached 50, I turned and began searching the yards first. I found Eric hiding behind a shed and Tyler crouched near a bush. Then I went into the woods for Jason and Matt. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, swinging between the trees. The forest felt heavier now, the air warmer, thicker. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No crickets, no wind, just silence. I spotted Matt crouched near a tree and yelled that I'd found him. He took off laughing, back toward the yard. That left Jason. I walked deeper, calling out that I was coming for him. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from ahead of me. I aimed the flashlight forward, but the beam hit nothing but trunks and leaves. The steps stopped. I stood there, my skin prickling, every sound too loud in my ears. Then, from behind me, Jason shouted that the round was over. I spun around. He was standing at the edge of the yard, waving. He hadn't been anywhere near me. My stomach twisted. Twice now. I'd heard someone walking who wasn't one of us. I told myself it was just an animal. It had to be, but it didn't sound like one. It was too steady, too heavy. We played a few more rounds. Each time I hid, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was out there with us. I'd hear faint branches snapping, the crunch of leaves, soft and distant, always in the wrong direction. Once, I even thought I saw a shadow shift between two trees, taller than any of us, standing still for a second before vanishing. When I told the others, they just laughed and called me paranoid. The final round of the night, Jason wanted to hide in the woods again. The others followed. I didn't want to go too deep, so I stayed near the edge, crouched in tall grass where I could still see the faint orange glow of the porch lights. Jason started counting. When he finished, the woods went dead quiet. I could hear my own breathing, the faint buzz of mosquitoes. Then, out of nowhere, I heard whispering. It was close. So close it felt like it was right beside me, but I couldn't make out the words. My throat tightened. I peeked above the grass. Nothing. The whispering stopped. Then came the footsteps again, moving away this time, fading into the dark. I stayed frozen until I heard Jason call that the round was over. One by one, everyone came back laughing and brushing off dirt. When I joined them, Matt looked uneasy. "Did anyone else see the man?" he asked. We all stared. He said while he was hiding, he saw someone tall standing deep in the woods, not moving, just watching. Jason told him he was imagining things, but my stomach turned cold because I believed him. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps on leaves. I kept hearing that whispering in my head, replaying it over and over. The next day, I told myself it had to be some stranger walking through the woods. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Because when you're hiding in the dark, you know what it feels like when someone's looking for you. And that night, something was looking for us. Something that didn't stop when the game was over. It was a hot Saturday afternoon last July, the kind of summer heat that shimmered above the pavement and made the air feel heavy in your chest. I was 14 and lived out in the quiet part of Pennsylvania, surrounded by fields, trees, and long stretches of dirt road. My backyard was massive acres of open grass, a few scattered trees, and an old storage shed that leaned slightly at the edge of the property. My friends and I spent almost every day out there once school was out. That day, it was me, Ryan, Josh, and Adam. We were shooting hoops in the driveway, sweating through our shirts, laughing, complaining about the Sunday. It felt like every other summer day, boring, endless, and safe. Then a stranger walked up. He came from the direction of the dirt road that cuts past my house. He looked maybe 16, taller than any of us, with messy black hair and a gray shirt that looked too heavy for the heat. His jeans were dusty, and his shoes looked worn down. But what stood out most was how calm he looked. Like he wasn't lost or shy, like he'd already decided he belonged there. He asked if we wanted to even the teams out, make it 3-on-3. None of us said anything at first. Adam finally asked who he was. The kid said his name was Keith. Said he lived just up the road. I'd lived there my whole life and never seen him before. None of us had, but he smiled, said he'd seen us playing from the woods and figured he'd ask to join. It didn't sound strange in the moment. Out here, people wandered, sometimes hunters, hikers, kids from nearby farms. Still, something about how he said it made me uneasy. When Adam asked if he wanted to play basketball, Keith shook his head. He grinned and said, "Nah. Let's play something better. How about Manhunt?" Manhunt was like hide and seek with more adrenaline. One team hid, the other hunted. We all agreed instantly it sounded fun, and the yard was perfect for it. Keith insisted on being on the hunting team first. He said he loved finding people. There was something about the way he said loved that I still remember. We split into teams, me, Ryan, and Ben hiding. Keith, Adam, and Josh hunting. Adam kicked a soccer ball to signal the start, and the hunters turned away to count. I took off running toward the shed. Inside, it smelled like gasoline and dust. There were tools hanging on the wall, an old lawnmower, and a pile of folded tarps in the corner. I climbed under the tarps, trying not to move. It was hot, and the air under there was suffocating. I could hear faint voices outside, the crunch of grass, laughter fading in and out. Then everything went quiet. Minutes passed. 10, maybe 15. I started to think the others gave up when the shed door creaked open. I held my breath. Then, in one quick motion, the tarp ripped away. I looked up and saw Adam grinning. "Found you," he laughed. We walked back to the patio where the others were already gathering. Everyone was there except Keith. At first we thought maybe he was still searching. We waited, talking, drinking water, but he didn't come back. 10 minutes turned into 20. Adam finally shrugged. Guess he went home. It was weird, sure, but we didn't think much of it. The sun was setting anyway, and everyone started heading out. When I went back inside, I noticed something strange near my bedroom window, a piece of rope lying on the grass. Old, frayed, like it had been out there for months. But I'd mowed the lawn 2 days ago. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up, tossed it aside, told myself it was nothing. That night, after dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went room to room, checking locks. My dad always left one side door unlocked during the day. I locked it. I checked the shed from the kitchen window. The door was shut. Everything seemed normal. Around 11 p.m., I went to bed. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the AC. I scrolled on my phone until my eyelids grew heavy. Then I heard its soft footsteps outside my door. I froze. My dad sometimes got up to use the bathroom, but he always made noise, always cleared his throat. This was different. Quiet. Careful. I whispered, "Dad?" No answer. The footsteps stopped right outside my room. The floor creaked once. I sat up, heart hammering, and locked the door. I stood there, waiting, staring at the handle. Then, somewhere in the distance, I heard the front door close. I ran to my dad's room and shook him awake, trying to explain through my panic. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the shotgun from under his bed, told me to stay close. We searched the house top to bottom, every room, every closet, the basement, even outside. Nothing. The grass was still wet from the evening dew, but there were no footprints. He told me maybe I'd heard the house settling, but I could tell he didn't believe that either. We locked every door, double-checked every window. The next day, I told my friends. They laughed it off, saying Keith was probably some random weirdo who wandered off. Ryan didn't laugh, though. He said something felt off about Keith from the start, that he barely talked, just watched people play like he was studying them. That stuck with me. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Around 2 I woke up to a sound. Soft at first, like a scratch against the window. I sat up slowly, my skin crawling. The scratching continued slow, deliberate, like someone dragging a nail or a stick across the glass. My blinds were shut, but I could see faint movement behind them. My throat went dry. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I pulled one of the blinds down just enough to peek through. Someone was standing there, inches from the window. I couldn't see the face, just a dark shape, tall, motionless. I stumbled backward, shouting for my dad. He was up in seconds, grabbing the gun, running outside. I heard him yell, his voice echoing into the trees. 2 gunshots tore through the air. I ran to the porch, heart pounding. The figure was gone. My dad walked the whole yard with a flashlight, jaw tight, scanning the trees. Nothing. He didn't find anything. Not footprints, not movement, nothing. He told me if that kid ever came back, he'd regret it. He said it like a promise, not a threat. For weeks after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there. Sometimes at night, I'd wake up and stare at the window, half expecting to see that dark shape again. I still don't know who Keith was or what he wanted. Maybe he was just some drifter. Maybe he was planning something worse. But every time I think about that rope lying by my window, I get the same sick feeling in my stomach. Like whatever game he was playing, I almost didn't get the chance to stop it. Looking back at all 3 stories, It's strange how something as harmless as a game can peel back a layer of reality you were never meant to see. You grow up believing hide and seek is innocent, a way to laugh, to test your nerves, to feel that little thrill of being chased. But the truth is, the rules of that game only work when everyone playing has the same idea of what it means to play. The moment someone doesn't, it stops being a game. It becomes something else entirely. Each of those kids started their night expecting nothing more than fun, a way to kill time, to remember being young before life got serious. But what they found instead was silence, the wrong kind of silence, and the feeling of being watched by something that shouldn't have been there. Maybe it was a stranger, maybe something else. But what's worse is how ordinary it all seemed at first. A creaking step, a shadow under the door, a whisper in the dark. The kind of things you'd normally brush off, until they don't stop. There's a pattern to all of it if you listen closely. The first boy, trapped in his own house, realized how fragile the idea of safety is when the walls start whispering back. The second, lost among the trees, learned that the woods don't always play fair, that sometimes when you hide in the dark, you invite the dark to hide with you. And the last, well, he found out the hard way that not every smile means friendship. Sometimes people are worse than whatever monsters you grew up imagining under your bed. The scariest part isn't what happened, it's what didn't. No one ever found the footprints on the floorboards that night. No one saw the tall figure in the woods again, and no one ever figured out who Keith really was or where he went. It's the absence that haunts you, the unfinished part of the story that keeps replaying in your head years later when you're trying to convince yourself it's over. Maybe you've had a night like that too. The lights go out, and suddenly you hear something, a soft creak, a slow shuffle, the feeling that someone's standing just beyond the edge of where you can see. You tell yourself it's nothing. You keep breathing, slow and steady, hoping the sound stops on its own. But it doesn't. Because once you've felt that kind of fear, you know it's real. You know that the quiet isn't always empty. I think that's what makes these stories stick with people. They're not about ghosts that fly through walls, or curses that follow bloodlines. They're about the small cracks in everyday life, those moments when normal things stop behaving the way they should. A door that moves on its own. A voice where there shouldn't be one. A game that no longer feels like a game. If you ever find yourself playing hide and seek again, try this. Before you start counting, take a good look around. Memorize who's there with you. Make sure you can name every voice you hear, every laugh in the distance. Because once the lights go out and the footsteps begin, you'll want to be certain that everyone who's playing is supposed to be. And if you ever find yourself hiding, heart pounding, breath shallow, listening to footsteps that move a little too slowly outside your door, remember this. In every story like these, the ones who stayed perfectly still are the ones who made it out. The ones who thought it was still just a game didn't. So maybe it's better if you don't play at all. Because sometimes, when you're hiding, something else is already looking for you. And it's been playing much longer than you have.